Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 presented by Stakes here to do power rankings for SEC Hoops as we head into conference play. It'll be starting just days from now, really hours from now as we do this. Blake, let's start at the bottom as we always do. In my mind, and I think yours too, two teams at the bottom, South Carolina at 14, Vanderbilt at 13. Both teams having somewhat difficult seasons for different reasons. Carolina, of course, changing coaches. Vanderbilt should be ahead of where it is under Jerry Stackhouse in year 4. Anyway, these two teams will face off to open conference play. And in my mind, and maybe you would differ a little bit, these to me are clearly the two teams at the bottom here.
Yeah, they're in the bottom two spots, and we are doing these on Wednesday. Of course, the conference play starts on Wednesday night, but usually we do these on Mondays, so we'll get back to doing them on Mondays next week. But yeah, I mean these are two teams we pretty much had at the bottom for most of the season, and no reason to change that at this point. And yes, they will kick things off against each other next Tuesday, and yeah, just don't really see a lot of upside right now in terms of them getting out of these two spots.
Number 12, the Texas A&M Aggies, certainly the most disappointing team in the league so far. I got to see A&M play a little bit last night. It beat Northwestern State by 12, but was trailing at halftime. I don't know what's going on with A&M, Blake. What's your theory here?
Well, I mean, look, I moved A&M down here to this spot, behind teams like Ole Miss and Florida and teams like that, just because I just haven't seen enough to make me believe that, there's much of a difference between those kind of teams. But I mean, A&M, they're not as good defensively. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They have a lot more inconsistency, I think, on that side of the floor than maybe we're used to at times. And I think that's been one of the issues. But I don't know. This is just a team, I think, that just has not kind of found that missing piece. And maybe that missing piece is like I said, a guy like Quentin Jackson, who, I mean, you really think about it, he just kind of put him on his back at times last year and really down the stretch. And I said that coming to the season, I said that could be the one thing that concerns me a little bit about this team is he's not there. And I don't know if they've really filled that gap just yet, even though they don't have some, DePaul's not a terrible win. It's like, they've beaten solid teams, okay teams, but they don't really have any of those defining wins. And that's what kept them out of the NCAA tournament last season. And, I don't know. I think they're kind of, to me right now, whether you put them here, whether you put them at 11, I think they're one of the bottom 4 teams at the moment.
Well, we got Georgia at 11, and Georgia has not really registered a great win yet. In fact, no top 100 Ken Pom wins, but did beat Notre Dame for whatever that's worth last week. Comes off a win over Chattanooga on last Wednesday. Really, Georgia's not lost since a defeat to top 50 Ken Pom team UAB on November 22nd, accepting a loss to Georgia Tech. Mike White seems to be doing a solid job. They're playing a little bit of defense. Offensively, I think they're limited, but Georgia at 11 is probably a spot or two higher than we thought we might have the Bulldogs, say, a month ago.
Well, I think the difference with Georgia and A&M to me is that Georgia feels like they're heading in the right direction. A&M, I feel like, is, maybe you thought they were heading in the right direction after that close game against Memphis, but then they turned around and lost at home to Wofford, which, Wofford's not bad, but at the same time, that's just not a game you feel like you should lose. And so I think with Georgia, yeah, I mean, they don't have any resume-defining wins by any means. The 3, I guess 3 of maybe the toughest teams they've played, they've lost those games, but they had their chances against Wake. UAB's a really good team, as we know, with Andy Kennedy, and they certainly had their chances to win at Georgia Tech. So, yeah, I don't. Remember, we're ranking these teams heading into conference play. We're not telling you, we're not projecting ahead, because I look at Georgia's conference schedule and finding wins is going to be tough the first couple weeks. They may start 0-4 or something like that, but I think right now they're coming off 2 solid wins against Notre Dame and Chattanooga, and I just think I said this going into the season. I think Mike White will have this team way ahead of schedule. I think he'll get them back to at least being respectable. I don't think he'll have them as a title contender or anything like that, but I think that he will get them back on track quicker than people think. And I don't, their conference record, I don't think is going to be tremendous by any means, but I at least feel like they're heading in the right direction.
That's the Wednesday night tier of the SEC tournament bracket, if that's how they played it today. Before we get to the rest of the teams, a quick word from our sponsor, Stakes. They are a presenting sponsor at this channel. Get your predictions on the record. You can predict anything in the game for free and see how you measure up against fans and influencers. You can flex your wins. You broadcast your takes to our community of sports fans with just a few taps on your phone, and you earn credibility. Build your public predictions track record by winning competitions and earning NFT trophies for making the perfect call. Go to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 for a double welcome bonus. Free to join, free to play. It's a predictions app and not a betting app. So get in there, have some fun, and help out the folks who make our channel possible. Okay, number 10, the Ole Miss Rebels, who, in my opinion, have probably had the most disappointing last month of any team in the league. Ole Miss starts 6-0, has two key games against OU and Memphis. Right around Thanksgiving, it dropped both those. Lost a game to a good UCF team a couple of weeks ago, and then one of the shockers in the league, losing to North Alabama at home on December 20th. The Rebels haven't played since, but that one very much upset the fan base, and I can't say I blame them.
No, I mean, a lot of discussion, maybe the worst loss in program history. And anytime you're having those discussions, it's not ideal heading into SEC play. And, I think you just as easily put Ole Miss at 12 and flip A&M and Georgia if you wanted. I don't really see a lot just yet. I mean, they did beat a Florida Atlantic team that's pretty good. They beat Stanford, beat Temple. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty disappointing the last month or so. And I think now the problem becomes their schedule. They play Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi State, and Auburn to start SEC play. And again, you talk about a team that could be 0-4. Ole Miss could be 0-4 just based on that schedule. But at the same time, we've seen them win some games like this in the past and get a couple of those wins to kind of get some momentum going. Maybe that happens here, but I don't know. It's a team I think offensively just is not there yet. Just kind of having to sort of hang on in some of these games to keep it close, and their defense having to carry them because they just are not able to score enough points. And we'll see if that changes. And to me, it's going to probably be hard to change against, especially open up SEC play against the best defensive team in the country in Tennessee.
Another team that's been disappointing, Florida. Number 50 in KenPom, but my goodness, you look at the Gators and what they have done or not done against who. Florida has played 5 teams inside the KenPom top 50. It's 0-5 against those teams. Most of those, well, I take that back. Florida Atlantic and Xavier were fairly close. The others were not for the most part. And all of Florida's wins coming against teams outside the top 150 in KenPom, other than Florida State, which is 149. So that's right there. Gators need to start beating somebody, Blake. This is a team that I think we both thought could make the NCAA tournament, but the Gators are going to have to do a lot of work in the conference schedule to get big wins because they did themselves no favors with the out-of-conference portion.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a resume right now. They have nothing to lean on in terms of getting there. Like, literally don't have a thing that they could sort of, try to convince you that they're an NCAA tournament team. And that's where I think this is a very important start. We talk about LSU. We'll mention them in a second. Just probably one of the most brutal first halves of an SEC schedule I've seen. But Florida's kind of the opposite, where I think they have a manageable first half of the schedule, whereas I think some of their toughest games come on the back end. And I think by the product of the scheduling, they play Kentucky twice. They only play Tennessee once. They only play Alabama once, I think. They only play Arkansas once. So you see where I'm going here.
You better win a lot of those games.
Schedule actually isn't very kind in terms of building a resume. It's kind in terms of you can win some games, but I think they don't get a lot of the top teams twice. And I think this is where they need that if they're going to make the tournament. And they don't really have those opportunities because they get Vanderbilt twice. They get LSU twice. They get Georgia twice. I think so like teams like that, they get A&M twice. So like there's a lot of wins that don't necessarily do a lot for you. So yeah, I mean, they left a lot of opportunities on the table, and we'll see if they can get off to a nice start. It'll be easier said than done when they go to Auburn on Wednesday.
Well, LSU has made a lot of its opportunities. We got the Tigers at 8. They're 11-1, a controversial loss to Kansas State, the only blemish on that. But you've seen LSU continually just trickling down Ken Palm's rankings lately. LSU at number 78 as we do this on Wednesday morning. That is because all the Tigers' wins lately have been close, and they've all been, for the most part, other than the game against Wake on a neutral floor a couple of weeks ago, against pretty bad opponents, all 150 and up in the Ken Palm top 353 or whatever the number of teams is now. But in any case, yeah, I mean, a narrow win over an East Tennessee State team that's not very good, the latest in that. LSU, another one of those teams, and we'll get to one of those in a minute, although the other one did win a big game recently. But gaudy record, not a lot of meat on the bone in terms of resume. That win over Wake Forest is it, and I don't know how much that's going to move the needle at year's end.
No, and I've said before, I'm higher on LSU than the computers are because I think at a certain point it's,
Yeah.
well, you're not winning by enough. Well, they're 11-1. I mean, they've won a lot of close games, and I think there's something to that. Is when you get in those close games, which they will have in SEC play, they've been here before. They know how to win them because they've only lost one of them. And again, that's they had their chances against Kansas State, and basically comes down to the final play of the game. So I don't think you can necessarily knock a team for that. Now, the critics of LSU will no doubt be out in the next month because of the schedule they're going to play, and they're going to lose some games. And they may get blown out in some of these games. I don't know, but it's just not an easy schedule. But I feel like we have to give them credit for being 11-1. And yes, it's not been pretty. They haven't blown teams out the way that some of these other teams have. And I do think, again, there's two sides of the coin there, and you can play both of them in terms of making an argument. But I just think that they're still going to be okay. But again, the problem is the schedule. They start off with Arkansas, they go to Kentucky, they go to A&M, home against Florida, at Bama, home against Auburn, home against Tennessee, at Arkansas, home against Texas Tech, at Missouri, home against Bama, at Mississippi State. That's until February the 8th. Like, that is a brutal stretch where really, I mean, A&M's the only team in there that's outside the top 50 in Ken Palm. And that's a lot of games in a row against really good teams. And so, to me, now the back half is way easier. The back half, they could maybe even run the table on the back half of the schedule. I don't think it'll happen, but that's just kind of the difference in the first half. So they have to, you say they don't have a resume. Well, they're going to have their resume is going to come in the next month, depending on if they can win half these games. LSU's sitting in a really good spot, because I think that's where, because they haven't lost, they don't have any bad losses. And that's what we talk about with teams like A&M and Ole Miss and all those. They have bad losses. LSU does not. And I think that's the one thing they've avoided. And we always say that can actually help you come tournament time if you're trying to build a resume. If you can just get some solid wins, if you don't really have any bad losses, that's going to keep you in the conversation. So we'll see what happens with the Tigers. But I think they're sitting in a better spot than most will give them credit for.
Well, I don't want to get us too detoured here, but what comes to mind with LSU was Arkansas last year. Arkansas didn't do much in the way of out-of-conference schedule last year, and actually did have kind of a not-so-great loss to Hofstra mid-December. Did not start conference play well, but got it together mid-January on, and the rest is history. And I think Arkansas was, a 4 or 5 last year in the tournament. But point here is the 4 seed. Is it teams like that, if they take care of business in conference play, can get there on Selection Sunday? And I don't think that this LSU team is as good as last year's Arkansas, but it does have KJ Williams, who can carry a team and has carried LSU at times to big wins.
Yep. No, they got a lot of opportunities. I mean, if you just look at their home games, they get Arkansas, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Texas Tech, Alabama.
Yep.
Those are all home games. Baton Rouge, big win opportunities. Missouri towards the end of the season. That's okay. That's an okay one right now. So, yeah, I think that there's something to it. They could have lost a lot of these games, but they didn't, and that's the difference. They're sitting at 11-1 and don't have a bad loss to speak of yet, and they've got plenty of big win opportunities. So, I think LSU's sitting in a fine spot heading into conference play.
Okay, since we last talked about Missouri, after that disastrous loss to Kansas, The Tigers got a really nice win over UCF on a 40-foot heave at the buzzer, and then just demolished Illinois and St. Louis earlier last week. Is this a team that's kind of getting it together heading into conference play? I mean, the way that it starts won't be easy. Home game against Kentucky, road trip to Arkansas before it gets a little easier, Vandy, A&M, Florida. But, boy, that was one of the more impressive wins this year, what Dennis Gates' team did to the Fighting Illini last Thursday.
I mean, again, you don't make the tournament in December, but if the tournament was played right now, like Missouri's safely into the field. And I think that's, again, that's what we talk about, right? They're 11-1. Yes, they played a bad schedule. Their schedule does not compare to some other teams, but where's the bad loss? They don't have one. And, that's what I said. That's a part of the non-conference equation. It's not always can you rack up a lot of good wins, because you're going to have plenty of those opportunities in SEC play. It's just, can you avoid the bad losses? Well, they did that, and they picked up several good wins. And I think that's where, you can pick apart Missouri with the defense, and we will, because they're going to have some defensive lapses. Trust me, they're still there. But offensively, I said before, I think they're going to be just fine offensively to be able to hang in there with pretty much every team they play. Now, it didn't happen against Kansas because their defense did not give them any sort of opportunity to do that. But yeah, I mean, that Illinois win is exactly what you want to see, and that changes your opinion, I think, of Missouri now, because they've proven they can beat a good team. Now, I know Illinois struggled a little bit, but it doesn't matter. It's how they won the game that I think is very important to see here. And as we said, I mean, look at the schedule. How does Missouri open up SEC play? They're home against Kentucky. They're at Arkansas. And so these are two big games. And I think defensively, obviously they have to be on to win either one. But offensively, they will score some points. And I'd be surprised if they don't, just based on, where it's at. And really, go beyond that. They play Vanderbilt, A&M, and Florida after that. I mean, Missouri's got a chance to get off to a good start here in SEC play. But yes, the Illinois win was huge, because that would put them in the tournament as of right now, and that gives them sort of one of those resume-defining wins to this point. But the good news is they're going to have plenty of those opportunities the rest of the way to add some more to it. So, yeah, you certainly feel a little bit better about the Tigers, I think, after that Illinois win.
All right, speaking of Tigers, we get to Auburn at 6. And let me do good news, bad news. I'll start with the good news. I liked the way Auburn responded after a loss at Southern Cal. Goes to Washington and just pounds the Huskies, 84-61. This coming after Auburn had lost, not just the USC game, but the one to Memphis back a couple of weeks ago. That's the good news, is I like the way they responded. Bruce Pearl's got a history of getting his team to play well. The bad news, Blake, I still just don't know that the ceiling for Auburn is a lot higher than where we've got the Tigers until those guards play better. The three-point shooting has not been good. The turnover situation has not been good. And I have a lot of questions about this team right now. I wouldn't bet the house that Auburn doesn't get it right, but it's the same things that we've been talking about now since late February, early March with Auburn, that Bruce Pearl just hasn't really in some ways gotten figured out. Is that too hard?
No, and I think Auburn actually, I think Auburn's probably better than Mississippi State, but
I think so probably too, but I don't know that it can crack the top 4.
Well,
it could. It could.
Well, here's the thing: is like I don't know how, because we had Mississippi State at 4. I think, I don't know, whenever, a week ago, before they lost that game to Drake, and it's like they're another team that we're really going to learn a lot about the next 2 games, because Mississippi State starts SEC play against Alabama and Tennessee. We've said defensively, I think they're good enough and we can just go ahead and talk about them now, because they're next on our list. I think Auburn probably should be ahead, and that's where I kind of flip-flopped a bit in my individual rankings, trying to figure out what to do with them. I think Auburn has the better resume to this point. But, it's like I said, Mississippi State's so good defensively. I just don't know if offensively they're going to get there. And I don't think they are going to get there, because they play the weakest teams they'll play the rest of the year. That makes sense. They're only going to play tougher competition from here, and they've struggled to score, in some of those games. So I think that's where you look at it from both Auburn and Mississippi State standpoints. I think we're specifically looking at them offensively. Auburn's the better offensive team, even though they have some weaknesses. So in hindsight, I may flip these two. But again, I don't want to knock Mississippi State just yet, though, because I know they lost that game to Drake, but I think their defense is going to make every game close. But the problem is, right, if they get in one of those games where they slip just even a little bit defensively and they play a good offensive team, oh, by the way, that's going to be the team they play Wednesday night in Alabama.
Yeah.
They can get blown out because I just think, they can't keep up offensively. And I think the thing for Auburn is, like you said, the better guard play, not turning the ball over enough, not turning the ball over as much as they have, being able to make shots, jump shots. That's going to be important, I think. But yeah, these are two teams that both of these, I don't know. Like, it's just, to me, like, if you're talking about like the SEC and NCAA tournament bids, like, these are the last two teams at this point you feel
Yeah.
like are kind of, and we
I was
talked
gonna
about
say,
Missouri, but
State feels like one of those 11 or 12 seeds on Selection Sunday. Just the lack of wins and the lack of offensive firepower. That's a team that maybe slips in and then could give somebody a real headache based on style of play.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you can argue. I think honestly, if I had to redo it, I'd probably have Auburn at 5 and State at 6. But like I said, I don't think you can take away Mississippi State defensively and how good they've been, because they're another one where it's like, well, can you really knock them for the fact that they won every game except for the last one they played here, losing by 6? I don't know. So it's one of those kind of things. But I still think Auburn's. I think maybe we overreact to Auburn's issues at times because of where it's just the overall trajectory of the program, I think. And you just kind of assume at this point that they're going to be a top 15 team every year.
Yeah.
And this can still be one of those teams, but I just don't, like I said, we said before, I don't think this team has the upside of the team, obviously last year and in that kind of situation. So maybe we overreact a little bit to what Auburn's done, but you just want them to play better, I think, in certain situations. And again, they've had kind of a weird non-conference schedule. They play the game against Northwestern. That's 43-42. Didn't look great against Memphis, lost that game against USC, but then bounced back and took it to Washington. So there's a lot of those kind of things where I just feel like inconsistency is still there, but the defense is there, and the defense will, continue to be what they lean on. It's just they have to figure some things out offensively, I think.
Okay, before we get to our top 4, a quick shout to our other sponsor, BROTHROW, which lets you bet on all 50 states. Because BROTHROW isn't the house, bettors have a fair chance at winning. So if you don't like betting 11 to win 10, this is the place for you. It is the only sports betting platform that doesn't take a cut of every bet. You don't have to deposit money into a BROTHROW account. No deposits, no minimum bets. No need to connect your bank account. Bettors pay each other directly. It's a hassle-free sign-up process that lets you get in on the action in seconds. Go to brothrow.com/SE14. You can see that scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Terrific partner. Again, no downside here. You just pay the other guy if you lose. We love these guys. Hope they're going to be partners with us for a long time. So get in and check them out. Okay. Feels like we've had Kentucky at 4 for forever. We do again. Kentucky.
Well, they were at 5. They've been at 5 for a couple weeks. We had Mississippi State.
Okay, that's right. We did move them up. You're right about that. The disappointing. I mean, I say disappointing. It's kind of what we expected against UCLA. Kentucky rebounds to beat a horrible Florida A&M team, and frankly, that game was closer than the 20-point spread. I watched a little bit of that. Blake, where's this going, man? I have no idea.
Well, I mean, Kentucky moved up because Mississippi State moved down, and that's probably more about Mississippi State than Kentucky. And like we said, I think we could even have moved Mississippi State to 6 and Auburn to 5, but whatever. These are rankings and they are what they are. They'll change after the Wednesday night games. I don't know. I mean, there's no reason to spend a lot of time on Kentucky. We've said the same thing. Nothing's changed. Like, they've only played one game since the UCLA game. It's the same stuff. It's just, can they get there offensively? I don't know that they can at this point. But we'll see, because, they're going to play a defensive team in Missouri that's not been great. So maybe the offensive outburst they need is against them, and then they get to turn around and play Louisville, which feels like a gift at this point, based on how Louisville's season's gone. So, yeah, I think that you could actually see Kentucky build up some momentum here over the next 3 games, really, at Missouri, home against Louisville, home against LSU. So yeah, Kentucky's just not where we think they can be just yet. But you know what? I don't know if it's that
A
much
lot of
different than.
time.
Well, yeah, it's not that much different than we say with many other seasons with Cal's teams. Is that they usually figure it out in February, and I think this team will probably figure it out. It's just offensively, they're just very frustrating, and that's about all you can say. So,
Okay, here's another one. Tough to know what to do with them. Arkansas lost Trayvon Brazile a few weeks ago. It had been winning without him, but now Nick Smith Jr.'s whatever this injury situation is, we don't know. He missed the Asheville game, which the Razorbacks won handily. He is going to be out for the LSU game. Man, what are we thinking about the Razorbacks at this point? Because I mean, they're good. They got plenty of talent without him, but that was the guy that they had pegged their hopes on as being their best player. Brazile was a game changer for them inside. There's probably not another player like him in the league, maybe, or not many. And now the Smith thing. I was just hoping we would have some clarity with Arkansas, Blake, that Smith would get in there, he'd play, he'd stay healthy, and we're just right back to where they were about a month ago with the uncertainty and just kind of the lack of news on his health, other than the fact he's not going to play against LSU.
yeah, I mean, anybody who watches them, I don't know how you could say that they don't have the same upside without Nick Smith that they do with him, and they don't have the same upside without Nick Smith and Trevin Brazile, you know, as they would if both of them were on the floor. So I think that's, and you could say next man up, next man up. I get it, but it just doesn't work in this scenario because there's not another Nick Smith. And, so yes, Arkansas has won games without both guys at this point, haven't they? Of course they have. But now the schedule gets a lot tougher and the grind of SEC play begins. And I think it's just, there may be some ups and downs for this team, but depth was a strength. We said going into the season, they still got Anthony Black, who's a, future top 5 pick probably in the draft. And so he can still help get them where they want to go. And Jordan Walsh is, can step up. And there's a reason why I mentioned this guy third, is because I always say we just don't give him enough credit. But I mean, Ricky Council's still there. And as good as he's been this season,
had a tremendous year.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're still going to win games, even if Nick Smith and Brazile don't play well, we know Brazile's not playing the rest of the season. If Smith doesn't play the rest of the season, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if that's the case, then Arkansas will still win games. Can they still get as far as they could have with both guys on the floor? Probably not. But yeah, I mean, anytime you take a top 5 pick out of the equation, and it's a different thing when you get into playing tougher competition on a night in, night out basis, and that's what they're about to run into in SEC play. But again, they're still very talented, and we'll just see what it looks like without them. So,
number 2, we've got Tennessee, which is unbeaten when it's not playing the Pac-12. The 2 losses to Colorado and Arizona. You look at the Ken Palm profile, there's just bright green ink all over that page. Number 1 in adjusted defensive efficiency.
On
number
defense,
1 in
there
offensive.
is. Not offense.
Yeah. Offense is, well, there's one thing, offensive rebounding, the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the country. Yeah. This is a team that's it's going to be so opinions on them are going to be so split come March, because it's the same things last year that had Tennessee in the conversation of could finally crack the Final Four, and it's the same things that kind of undid their season a year ago that I think are keeping people from jumping on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm half joking about the offensive numbers because, yes, you can look, and Tennessee's put up some points this year, but it's still the same thing. If you look at like their efficiency numbers offensively, they're still not great, and that's what worries you when you play better teams, is that you're going to get some of those stretches that we've seen before where they just can't score. But the good news is their defense is so good that they will still, even if they go 5 minutes without scoring, well, guess what? The other team may go 5 minutes without scoring because they're so good defensively. And I think that's going to keep them in every game they play in. And I think you almost throw out the Colorado loss at this point, because think about how many threes they were shooting in those first couple games. But since then, they've just played they played to their strengths, and offensively that is, and it's working better. It's not perfect, but it's working much better. And I think that's where you're going to see them. Getting everybody healthy is the big thing. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, Josiah Jordan-James hasn't played, and he's barely played in the past month. Played 16 minutes, 14 minutes, a couple games here or there, but getting him healthy is priority number one still, because if they're going to get where they want to go, I still think they've got to have him on the floor. But getting everybody healthy, finding your groove offensively, which I think they've started to get more balance there in how they play offense. But yes, the long stretches maybe without scoring, shooting issues, turnovers at times, are those still going to be things we talk about? Probably, just because we've seen it before and we've kind of seen it already with this team at times. But this is still, like you said, I mean, they're still in pretty good shape. They've beaten Kansas, they've beaten USC, they've beaten Maryland, they've beaten Butler. This is still a really good team. And I think you're still looking at, for me right now, I think it's Tennessee and Alabama, 1A and 1B. I don't think there's a lot that separates these two. But the Vols are fine. That they're in a fine spot, even if we may have some issues with their offense at times.
Well, Alabama are number one this week. I saw a stat this week that Craig Pinkerton at the SEC office put out. I think it said Alabama is the only team since the 1965-66 North Carolina team that's beaten a pair of number ones. I can't remember if that was before Christmas or before New Year's, probably the same thing. But anyway, that's Alabama's season to date. I think if Alabama beats Gonzaga and Birmingham a couple weeks ago, the profile looks a little different, but it's still pretty darn good. This team just can pound you on the offensive glass. It's defending. It plays really fast, and it's got perhaps the best player of the league in Brandon Miller.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear at this point. It's Brandon Miller and Oscar Tshiebwe are the two best players, and that's not knocking anybody else. But to me, they're the two most impactful players in terms of what they bring to the table. Just with everything there and just everything that they can both do. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Miller's been fantastic. Alabama, if they can just stop turning the ball over, I think they have a higher upside than any other team in the conference. And if they just gotta stop turning the ball over, though, they turn it over quite a bit, and that's been something we've talked about this season. And there's still a team that's going to rely on the three, and at times that can make you hesitate a little bit. But that to me is what they, and we'll talk about it in our previews we're going to do for Wednesday night games. I mean, they're going to Mississippi State, a very good defensive team that will force turnovers, and I think it's actually a nice starting point for this Alabama team, because not that I think it's a nice starting point in terms of an easy matchup, but it's like your weaknesses.
It tests you where you need to be tested.
Yes, and I think that will test them right off the bat here, because they've got to take care of the ball better and a little bit more focus there. But Alabama's got a tough SEC schedule too, and I think right now they are the number one team, and I think they've played the toughest schedule, and I just think that they are probably better equipped heading into SEC play than anyone else because of just the pieces that they have in place. So
we're going to be previewing every single SEC basketball game this year. Best way to do that, hit that subscribe button. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, Steaks, to our associate sponsor, BROTHROW. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for watching us here at Southeastern 14.